That is just a beautiful sound, and it's a type of expression that I don't get with many other keyboards. But today we are looking at the SEABOARD Rise 2 from ROLI, and I want to talk to you about why it's not like other MIDI keyboards and why I really love this keyboard. But first, let's make some music so I can show you what's actually possible with the Rise 2. And I want to thank ROLI for sponsoring today's video. All right, so let me know what you thought of that music down in the comments below. I chose that specific genre and style of music because this is the genre and style that I love to make when using the Rise 2 because of the level of expression you get with a unique keyboard like this. It's MPE, but it's also just a different type of control surface that is not common in other keyboard controllers. It's this silicone surface that you can sort of sink and almost like breathe into. And as you heard, that sound was changing over time as I'm adding pressure. And that's just one of the ways that the Rise 2 reacts to the physicality of playing into the keyboard. So if I open up this project of that track that we just heard, all of the sounds you're hearing, aside from the percussion samples at the beginning, are from Equator 2, which is a synth designed by ROLI. It's a hybrid synth, so like part acoustic, part electronic. And as you can hear from this string sound that I've continued to play, the solo strings preset, it's of course sample based, but watch what happens when I put my keys on the keyboard and in the Equator 2 plugin. It's tracking each one of those notes very sensitively. It's tracking how much pressure I'm putting. It'll even track if I slide up the keys, which is going to change the sound in a very realistic way to if an actual violin player changed their bowing technique, which this is a major reason I love the SEABOARD Rise 2, because we can get such a realistic sound out of these acoustic instruments. Whether you're doing the sliding like I just talked about, or you're doing something like a simple vibrato, and then obviously just using pressure to truly change the timbre of the sound, it all adds to realism, and you can't do that with a physical keyboard that you're literally just doing on and off with, you know, your more typical MIDI keyboards. And as you can see over in this panel of the Rise 2, we have some additional control, and you might have seen me working with those during the performance and doing some automation. Before I talk too much about the automation though, I want to mention that the degree to which some of these gestures react, like glide, for instance, which is my ability to sort of bend down the keyboard, it might not always be practical for me to have that turned all the way up. It might not always sound realistic. So if I just bring that down a bit, I can get it to sound a bit more realistic, but I can also just have it be less sensitive or turn it off completely. So now I can't actually do that gliding motion. And that is important if I'm doing an instrument like, let me bring up this piano sound, which is of course also an Equator 2 sound. It's just called acoustic piano. Some of these they're all Equator sounds, but they might be from the Equator 1 or Equator 2 libraries, but they're all MPE sounds from the Equator 1 or 2 engine. But this acoustic piano sound, right? I probably don't, it's not like realistic for a piano to bend like that, and I am going for a more realism type sound. So it's a little bit difficult when playing chord progressions sometimes to not accidentally slide on a keyboard surface like this. It's easy to find the notes because we've got these grooves, these frets basically right on the keys that help us feel our way around. But I do want to eliminate any type of gliding when I'm playing the piano, which I can do right on the keyboard. And then when I go back to playing something like the strings, I can just dial that back in. And you have control of not only the glide there, but also the slide and the pressure sensitivity. That's what these macros and these symbols actually represent, those gestures in ROLI's design language. But if I press this button here, those symbols go away in the illumination. And what you'll find is that many of these presets, let's open up another one. Here's a sound called granular flute. These macros actually do different things in the sound. So in an ambient track like this, if I want to just play, hold a chord, or have it evolve over time, I mean, this just has this beautiful tape quality sound to it. I can very easily do it from these macros, and these can also just be mapped in Ableton Live. But since I'm using Equator 2, I figure why not take advantage of the macros that are already mapped here. And the sound, because they sound great. Combine that with things like adding more pressure. You get this dynamic level of sound design via touch, via like using your actual hands rather than going into the synth engine, which maybe for many of you looks a bit complicated, and it is a bit complicated, but like we're translating the sound design process into now touch, which I love, just making these slow, beautiful ambient sounds and morphing them over time. A level of sound design you don't really get from other keyboards. Sure, you could tweak knobs here and there, but combine the gestures of MPE with this quick automation and these macros here. It's super nice to have just right on the controller. And you've probably noticed that there's already an XY pad here that we can map, but will also, if you're using a preloaded sound from Equator, will help us manipulate the sound even more. Let's try another sound here. Go Dreams. See, that's just a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite presets. It's the opening sound. Of the piece, but it's like part synth, part piano, part string instrument. And could I load up Equator 2 with, a typical MIDI keyboard? Yes, of course. But if you see on the screen, these bubbles on the keyboards, they're constantly moving. There's constant gestural change. And you'll notice that as I slide up this key here, only that note is reacting. That's the power of MPE here. Adding vibrato to a note, though it's subtle, it's there just for that note, not for every key. And I could sit here and just play this all day. Let's relieve some pressure. Let's bring it back in. The only way I can describe this is it's like I'm breathing into the keyboard, which is why I could sit here and play a sound like this all day. And let that fade away. And of course, Ableton Live is my DAW of choice, and we have previously in the past been limited in our MPE options, but now that they've added full MPE here, you can see right in Live's preferences that next to my SEABOARD Rise, we do have a box to check there for MPE. We could, of course, disable that if we wanted to, if you didn't want to take advantage of all those cool MPE gestures. But the Rise 2 also comes with a dashboard, which gives you even more control over the Rise 2. You can change some of these curves. So I think for some of these sounds, well, you can do this in Equator, but you can do it globally for the whole keyboard as well. Like if I wanted the pressure to have a lower, like 0 value or a lower low value, I could change that. Any of these curves can be adjusted. We can also change, right? I talked about, eliminating glide, right? But I could just flip this to piano mode, and now globally the keyboard would be out without a glide function. But I'm going to keep it in to MPE default mode. And there's one other option here that I'll point out, which is semitone legato, which is very cool, which makes it easier, slightly easier and more uniform if you're going to glide between two notes that are right next to each other. So for instance, you can glide between those. Let me actually switch sound so it's more obvious. Let me go back to that string sound because this will be super obvious for you. So playing these two adjacent notes. So that is just an easy bend there. So you can imagine if you're playing like a guitar instrument or stuff, you can get a really nice natural bend sound. You can do it physically, but you probably have to train a little bit better, as we do as musicians, to really get it perfect. ROLI makes it easy for us in the dashboard, having this semitone legato option, which we can of course turn off if we don't want that. And of course, you have your MIDI assignments, you have your pitch bend range. It's all controllable via the ROLI dashboard. And then you get finer control within Equator 2, which I should mention I have loaded as a VST within Ableton Live right now, but you can also run Equator 2 standalone with no DAW. You saw this in the performance, but you can actually use the Rise 2 wirelessly as well. So if I just unplug that USB, and if I go to my audio MIDI setup with the Bluetooth, the Rise 2 is already there. Boom, let's connect it. I'm connected. And now, We're playing just the same macros, everything works, and we are actually completely wireless. You get the point. So the Rise 2 is a very cool controller. Am I going to use it on every single track that I make? No, probably not, but that's because it is a very specialized controller. I can use it as a normal MIDI controller. Turn off all the cool functions and it will just work as note on and off like any other MIDI controller. But it has such a specialized keybed and such a specialized feature set as an MPE controller that when I want to make these beautiful ambient soundscapes, or when I want to make a more realistic sounding, whether it's a score with strings or even a guitar line, which if I didn't want to play actual electric guitar but load up a plugin and do all these natural bends and things like that, I'm pulling out the Rise 2 because it's the only controller that I have that can truly do this. And not to mention, I don't want to be too superficial, but look at this beautiful design here. I mean, this is metal. This is a beautiful centerpiece piece of gear that ROLI, not only from a feature perspective, but from a design perspective. Look how thin that is as well. It's a beautiful keyboard, and it also inspires beautiful music in my mind. So I hope you enjoyed the music that we made today in this look at the Rise 2. If you did, let me know in a comment below what you think. Leave a thumbs up on the way out. And thank you to ROLI again for sponsoring this video. You can find out more about the SEABOARD Rise 2 at the link in the description. That's going to be it for now. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.